This is as contradictory can be, and I'll show you why I say so. This article, written by Andrew Heighton, March 28, 2025, talks about Shuhei Yoshida claiming that Japan's studio was closed because PlayStation did not want AA games. It's been a long time since many fan favorite PlayStation franchises have been seen. This has a lot to do with Japan Studio's obscure closure in 2021 and Shuhei Yoshida's departure as Sony Interactive Entertainment Worldwide Studios. Sony is fixated on delivering high-energy, big-time blockbusters for PlayStation owners. Examples of this strategy include God of War, Horizon, Ghost of Yotei, blah, 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 blah. However, it means a less driven approach toward AA game development. The gap between indie titles and AAA giants is larger than ever, and part of this is Shuhei Yoshida stepping down as SIE Worldwide Studios president, which in turn caused Japan Studios to close. In a translated interview with AV Watch, Yoshida explains, I was in charge of the first party, so I was asked to make a game that was powerful enough to sell hardware. When you make something like that, the company pushes you a lot. The company wanted such things, and while we had to make them, the scale of development and the sales required were getting bigger and bigger. He added that company creators were coming up with great ideas, and while they were, in quote, very creative and interesting, they were ultimately deemed AA. He said the Japan studio ceased to exist soon after he stepped down as president, and even brought on by PlayStation's corporate restructuring. In quote, at the time, the Japan studio was a team that was good at making AA, and it was a studio. In case, it probably doesn't match what the company first project were looking for, explained Yoshida. Now, here's the crazy thing, is this particular reasoning is almost very weird when you see that Sony is licensing out these same games to go ahead and sell and make more money. And what's even much more weird is that they have a third-party plan to go ahead and acquire third-party content into their portfolio from other developers. And one of the strategies is actually getting AA games that have already been made there. This is from an interview that was done with Sean Benson, who is the third-party portfolio VP. Let me see what the position of Sean Benson is. As Sony Interactive's Entertainment's head of third-party portfolio and acquisitions, Sean Benson is in a good position to trace the platform holders' evolving strategies when it comes to, in her words, making PlayStation the best place to play. In this interview, Sean Benson talks about how PlayStation's approach is usually, well, they've always pretty much gone with the splash in terms of exclusivity. That's kind of like their main thing. And, Sean says this, and they quote it, one of the biggest splashes a platform holder can make on the third-party front is exclusivity. And while we rarely see full exclusive third-party games in the AAA space these days, and Benson says that's partly because it wouldn't be a good fit in a lot of cases for a variety of reasons. Benson is quoted as saying there's room for exclusives where it makes sense, obviously, but really the focus, especially with digital distribution model that is more prevalent in the generations past, is that there are different types of gameplay out there, Benson says. For example, free-to-play games and so on and so forth. But all of this is leading to where Benson is going to talk about how the indie scene is a very solid scene for them to basically go ahead and engage in. So, in this missive here, Sean Benson says, look at Stray, look at Kenna, look at Sifu. Those games are revered as some of the biggest types of IPs for PS5, and those were created by indie teams. So Sean Benson took over this role and started to eye indie teams in acquiring their content. And all these games basically went into PlayStation's coffers as exclusive deals. What this tells me is PlayStation's focus is not to make or develop these games anymore. They don't seem like they're interested in developing these games. If the games are not big and flashy, I don't think they're interested in them. Rather, they want to go ahead and just, walk into the indie buffet or other developer buffet, and when the game is all good and ready, they pick and choose and say, this is the one that we want for our platform. Let's make a deal. I'm starting to understand this piece of PlayStation's strategy. Now, I can see why. And, this is very interesting because no one can come out here and talk nonsense anymore, about the fact that Xbox makes AA titles and small scale titles and some big titles. Because if you look at Xbox's portfolio, it's actually quite broad. Like when you go into their Xbox, if you go to, the library of Xbox games, you're going to see like a lot of really small games. Like there's a lot of them here. You see some big ones, but you see a lot of small games. These games are basically, in most cases, if everything here, nurtured through Xbox's pipeline. On the PlayStation side, we heard Hiroki Totoki say something about them not having made a lot of games from original IP, even though they have original IP sitting there. So PlayStation fans have been asking for games like Sly Cooper. They've been asking for all kinds of fun PlayStation titles from back in the day. We saw Ted Price, and this is not even just the AA, whatever. We saw Ted Price come out and say that, Killzone 4 was not greenlit and all of this stuff. And it's very interesting overall to see that a solid piece of PlayStation's, strategy is that it will pretty much continue to take the money-hatted process over the risk of actually having made the video games. That's basically their business strategy. Let me put it on paper right here. So this is one of PlayStation's pillars right here. So let's say this is PlayStation. Somebody was calling. I did a video on Xbox, and I did a thing with their pillars, and somebody said that was an Xbox shield because I actually showed Xbox as pillars. PlayStation wants to do big AAA, games. Bam, God of War, boom, The Last of Us, bazam, right? They want to do the big AAA games. That's going to be one of their core pillars. Then they want to get out there and they want to work with studios to money hat games of all sizes, be it AAA games. I'm going to put this in yellow. And then they now basically would prefer to money hat, because they've been doing this since the PS2 days, by the way, right? AA titles. And for the most part, they will do, the best version level of economics with it. Basically, hey, why don't you give us Hogwarts Legacy and give us a store, Warner Brothers, right? Or why don't you give us Batman Arkham Knight and give us this map, and that map will not be available anywhere else, or this skin, that will never be available everywhere else, or may never be available, will be available after a year or something. Or in the case of Call of Duty, it was double XP weekend, exclusive double XP weekend. Can you imagine that? Yeah. All of these little things are how they've basically been able to carry out their business. And it's a little wonder, or I guess it's shocking how Xbox survived being on the receiving end of all of this. It's just so weird because I remember buying Batman Arkham Knight, and the PlayStation version I bought had all of this really cool stuff that came with it. And I remember before I even bought my copy, I played a copy on a buddy of mine, his Xbox One. And I noticed that some of his, combat maps and stuff, I guess, okay, yeah. I played his, then I played my copy after I got it, then I played his again, and I was like, dude, stuff's missing here. And that's basically what Xbox has been doing for, that's basically what PlayStation has been doing for, many years. That's kind of their business strategy when it comes to content, at least. I mean, you can add the other pillars PlayStation Plus, which is their subscription service, which is where they work with other folk. You can add that pillar as well. I mean, if you want to go ahead and add it, it's something that brings in money for them, right? And then now they want to add another pillar of live service games, which will be another pillar for them, which is something that they were doing, and then they canceled 10, but they still have some that are into play that are still going on. Then they have their PC Steam, thing going for them where they make some money, off of Steam. Sorry, they print some money out of Steam, and so they do have some really solid pillars. The only challenge with them is they haven't really evolved a lot of their business to be able to take advantage of a lot of what is out there. This is why, when that document leaked, they said that their, pillars are dated and behind the competition. Interesting stuff. This paragraph is very interesting. It says, check this out. She adds, this is Sean Benson, we see value in all kinds of games and is a wide spectrum. We don't try to relegate them to an indie corner. They're just sitting alongside the biggest games. Look at Stray, Kenna, Sifu. These games are revere some of the biggest IPs and were created by indie teams. So it's very much a priority for us and continues to be. This isn't the first time Sony has wooed and showcased indie developers. They were also a key part of the early PS4 success, featuring Jonathan Blow at its PlayStation 4 reveal and devoting a segment of 2013's E3 to indies ahead of system's launch. But Sony's relationship with small indie developers frayed over the course of the PS4 lifespan, with indies in recent years pointedly criticizing the company for poor communication, lack of promotion, and not letting them participate in sales events. Very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff at the end of the day. This for me is just a learning exercise, by the way. I'm just figuring out more and more. I mean, after that Phil Rosenberg interview, I'm like, man, I need to get a sense of PlayStation's business in terms of these things. And man, I tell you what, this has been a treasure trove. Big treasure trove. Thanks for watching the video. Appreciate y'all so much. Talk to me in the comment section. Peace out.